Welcome to App Stories, a weekly exploration of the world of apps. Today's show is brought to you by the Omni Group and Twist by Doist. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is my co-host, Federico Vitici. Hi, Federico.
Hey, John, how are you?
Oh, doing really well. I wanted to congratulate you on being finished with at least the writing portion of your big review.
Yeah, thank you. So I should say some people on Twitter, after I shared the good news, thought that I was done with the review, but
I saw that.
that is that is actually
It's far from true, right?
That is far from the truth. I'm done with the text part of the review, which is all the chapters have been written and edited multiple times. So I don't have to, unless the iOS 11 GM has some major and unexpected changes, I shouldn't have to struggle to finish a chapter 2 days before the publishing date. So as every year, my iOS review is going to launch on the same day that iOS 11 officially launches, perhaps a couple of hours before Apple flips the switch. So people have time to read, at least half of the review, maybe. At least the chapter that they're really interested in.
Right.
But the being done with the text part doesn't mean that I'm done 100%. So
Right.
compared to previous years, this is a huge change for me because, for example, last year, I think the conclusion and maybe the everything else chapter, I was still tweaking and working on those really a couple of days before the review was due to be published on the website.
You must get really nervous every time a new beta comes out, because this year, I think more than in the recent past, there have been quite a few betas towards the end of, we're days before the event on the 12th, and we just got another beta a couple of days ago.
Yeah, the beta cycle this year has been really different, but the good news is I think the real changes, they stopped at around beta 5 or beta 6, and the last 4 betas have been mostly about fixing the last few bugs and stability and, getting, for example, the setup screen, like the setup flow to have the correct screenshots and videos. That's stuff that I don't really care about. And I was really nervous during the first 4 betas, but I made a good call in, for example, this year I had a feeling that notifications with the cover sheet feature, that would get drastically changed during the betas. So as I was writing the review in July, I decided, you know what, I'm gonna leave this notifications chapter, which has been placed relatively early in the review, but I'm gonna leave it until the very end when I'm done with the other important things that I feel like those won't change. But because I thought notifications were gonna change, I waited before I wrote the chapter. So that was a good call, and it allowed me to not waste time writing something that wasn't going to be accurate anymore. And I'm going to talk about this, and I think I discussed some of what I did already on Connected with Mike and Steven, and I'm going to expand on this for Club MacStories members when we do our behind the scenes for my iOS 11 review that we do every year. But the core change this time around has been that I had an extra week for myself. So completely focused on writing and taking care of the puppies in July. And usually in previous years, I only had 1 week for myself. This time I had 2 weeks. And that extra week truly made a difference. And that allowed me to be finished with the text, not just with a draft, with something that I just typed and saved, but actually with a completely written and edited draft. Every chapter being edited multiple times, all the links are taken care of, all the footnotes are placed in the document. Something that at this point I can maybe read another couple of times, but without the pressure of knowing, oh, well, I still gotta write 2 chapters. That doesn't mean that I won't tweak the review. For example, there are some references to future iPhones. So I just imagine that the next iPhone is going to be named the iPhone Pro. But if it's a different name, that means I need to open the review and find and replace and correct those names that I imagined. There are still some minor tweaks to names and dates and features that I need to change, but the core of the document is done. And now I mostly have to care about the media of the review, so screenshots, videos, animations, that stuff, and the accessories, as I call them. So the website, the ebook for members, more surprises for members that I've organized this time, all the extra stuff that is around this sort of a multimedia event, which is what the iOS review has become. There's a lot of other things that I need to care about, and being able to focus on those instead of being constantly worried about finishing the review while I'm doing the screenshots and while I'm thinking about this other stuff, that's a big change, and I'm feeling much better this year.
Yeah, no, that's great. I remember last year, and it was a little crazy up to the very end. I wanted to ask you one thing about screenshots, though. Do you, I know you take screenshots as you're doing your research and as you're doing some of the writing along the way. So are you mainly at this point just going back and inserting screenshots that you've already taken, or are you taking screenshots now and figuring out exactly where to put them in the article?
I think it's a mix of both. So what I've done is I have in DevonThink, I have a database of all the research that I've done for the review. And I have folders for each beta. And inside each folder, there's some screenshots of things that I found more interesting than others and that I saved with some comments. Then with beta 10, I think it's the last one, I've started taking some screenshots that I already consider final and that I can use in the review, even if we're still not technically on the GM, but I'm gonna use those screenshots. So right now, what I have is a bunch of screenshots from really old betas and some final images that I can use in the review. And in the document, I would say that about 50 to 60% of the review already has placeholders, like comments that say, here you should put a screenshot of the doc, or here goes a screenshot
Okay,
of a notification. So most of the review, more than half of the review already has these placeholders. So
right.
what I will do is I will go back into DevonThink. I will look at the old screenshots from the old betas, and I will take a look at each one of them and ask myself, why did I find this interesting? And if it's still not worthy, I will take the same screenshot in the last beta that I have, so beta 10 or GM. And I will save it in a folder in DevonThink or in files. I still have to decide which app I want to use for the final screenshot organization, but it's probably going to be DevonThink. So then I'm going to delete those folders for the beta 1, beta 2, beta 3, like the really old betas. I will collect everything in a single place. I will name each screenshot with the name of the chapter, followed by a space, a dash, another space, and the name of the image itself. So, like, for example, Safari dash, I don't know, WebRTC, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And I will go through the screenshots, I will upload them with my workflows, put them in the review, and then I will think about the non-static image bits. So videos, the ones with sound, the ones without sound, and the animated GIFs that I want to loop in the review.
Mm-hmm.
The videos require more time because I have to encode them in 3 different formats. They have to be MP3, WebM, and Ogthera for compatibility purposes with with most people's web browsers.
Sure.
So I need to use. I have. This is one of the things that I cannot do on my iPad. I have a bunch of terminal commands on macOS, so I can. I use fmpeg and another 2 commands that I don't remember their names to encode these videos to different formats. And then the videos are really the last media items that I put into the draft. And in all of this, to give people an idea of how complex this entire project is, there's also special syntax that I need to use for the Markdown document. Because the review has a custom layout, we came up with a custom. It's not like a custom flavor of Markdown. It's a bunch of WordPress shortcodes inspired by Markdown, made just for me. My web developer made those for me. And I can use that syntax to generate special features of the review, like image galleries or the aside boxes, the videos that have the replay button, the videos that don't have the replay button. All those special features of the review come from this special syntax.
Right.
And to use that special syntax, of course, I have workflows that I combine with editorial and the workflow app to put them into the body text of my review. And all of these steps that I just described, they occur in the last week. So the week between the Apple event and the day before the review launches. And consider this, that in the past 2 years for the iOS 9 and iOS 10 reviews, I had to do this while I was still writing and editing the review. And that
Yeah.
was a nightmare.
That's crazy making for sure. No, I remember that very. I actually I think I put it out of my memory because that was a very stressful time for everyone, but mostly you.
Yeah, it was and the fact that I don't want to repeat my mistakes, and I have two dogs to take care of now, and I feel like this year, also because of the extra projects that I want to do around the review, I feel like it was necessary to be done earlier. If I wanted to do that, if I wanted to be more relaxed, and if I wanted to spend time with my girlfriend and my puppies when I was doing all of this, I feel like, I should find a way to be done by late August/early September. I was done in the first week of September, which I'm still going to count as a win.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely is a win because there's a lot of other things going on. I mean, I know we've got a lot of coverage of apps that take advantage of iOS 11 features coming up on the site too, and that's something that we've all been kind of working with, getting betas and testing them and figuring out who's going to write about what. And there's going to be a lot of coverage coming on Mac Stories at the same time that your review comes out or shortly thereafter.
Yeah, we set up a Trello board for MacStories, and we have an entire board dedicated to the apps and the articles that we want to prepare for iOS 11 and all the other updates that Apple has in store. But especially in terms of apps, we have. I mean, I was looking at my test flight yesterday, and right now it says that I'm testing 100 betas.
Oh
Uh,
wow.
yeah.
I'm
So
testing a lot too, but not quite that many. And it seems like the updates are coming like every 10 minutes at this point. There's so many
yeah,
updates coming in.
yeah, we're lucky enough that we now know quite a few developers that they want to send us these early access builds to allow us to test and give feedback, because these are many of the apps that we receive are actually apps that we use every day. So those developers, they find our feedback useful to improve the app. But also a lot of developers that send us these betas to prepare coverage in advance, which is really useful for us, because something that I think sets MacStories apart is we don't do quote unquote reviews on the same day. We need at least a couple of weeks or at least a few days to test an app and see if it actually works what we think of it. And this has been really useful ahead of major iOS releases, because come the Apple event in September, we already have a rough idea of how many app reviews we want to do when the new version of iOS launches. This year, I don't know if it's a combination of the fact that iOS is an iPad focused release, and of course, we tend to talk a lot about the iPad on Mac Stories, and we have a focus on iOS. There's a lot of excitement for iOS 11 and among developers, especially productivity apps. This year is different. We have so much stuff. So we set up this Trello board, and we're trying to assign articles to each other. And I think it's gonna be a busy month for Mac Stories. It's gonna be a busy month for Club Mac Stories, because it's also the second anniversary of the club is coming up, and of course we are organizing something again. There's my review. Alex is working on this WatchOS review. There's all these iOS 11 apps that are launching with SiriKit support, drag and drop, design changes. It's a lot of goodies coming, and it's gonna feel very nice after I started working on this stuff in June and thinking about what September was gonna be like. It's gonna be nice when it's all over, and we can look back and consider how much work we put into this month. Really.
It is. It's going to be a crazy month, but it's also going to be a lot of fun. And I think it'll be, I mean, if you visit Mac Stories or take a look at your club account, you're going to find just tons of things coming out all the way through the end of the month at this point.
Yeah, we're trying to find a balance between, we want as many people as possible to read our stories. So of course there's still gonna be all kinds of articles on the site, but also we want to reward those people that give us their money for extra content. And rest assured, you will get extra content this month. There's going to be a lot of stuff, a lot of perks, a lot of extras, and we've been working really hard on this, all of us, and I'm starting to see the end, and I'm feeling more optimistic than in previous years. And in all of these, there's also an Apple event coming up, and there's new iPhones launching, and God knows whatever else Apple has in store. So
I know.
um, it's crazy.
I'm kind of hoping at this point there aren't too many surprises on the 12th because everything's coming together and we don't need any monkey wrenches and extra work at this point, I don't think. But so I both dread surprises and I always enjoy surprises too, I guess.
It's a strange feeling when you want to be surprised, but also kind of, oh man, what is going to happen?
Right, exactly. Thanks to the Omni Group for sponsoring App Stories this week. The Omni Group was founded almost exactly 25 years ago. Let's take a stroll down memory lane, shall we? Omni started as a group of contractors working for big companies, including NextStep. Along the way, Omni even released a driver for the Pentium Pro chip, created an early browser called OmniWeb that worked on NextStep, OpenStep, OS X Server, and OS X, and they even ported games. At the same time, though, Omni started work on their own apps, like Omni Outliner. That really picked up steam in 2001 when Omni released OmniGraffle 1, Omni Outliner 2, OmniWeb 4, which it won an ADA for, and topped it off with OmniGraffle 2.0. 2006 saw the introduction of OmniPlan, an advanced project management system for OS X. In 2007, the company became employee-owned through stock options, and then in 2008, we saw the first release of OmniFocus, and right on its heels, OmniFocus for iPhone, which also won an ADA. 2010 saw the release of 2 of 5 iPad apps, OmniGraffle and OmniGraph Sketcher. A few months later, OmniFocus joined it. Then, in 2011, Omni Outliner was released on the iPad, and in 2012, OmniPlan, rounding out the iPad or Bust initiative. 2016 saw the announcement of Omni Automation, a cross-platform in-app scripting language. Since then, Omni has gone all in on the iPhone and iPad, with each point update and major release bringing more and more power to iOS devices. 2017 has brought a few new releases too, Omni Outliner 5 and OmniGraffle 3 for iOS, and free trials to almost all of the iOS apps. And there's more to come. Omni plans to start the first year of its next 25 with a few big surprises, so stay tuned. Thanks again to the Omni Group for supporting App Stories. We also have a topic for today aside from what's been going on at MacStories, and this is a topic that I had put on our Trello board quite a while ago and revisited after we did our interview with Dermot Daly, because one of the things that Dermot talked about when we interviewed him was the difference between working for an app design studio versus being an indie developer. And one of the differences that he highlighted was he took the example of the podcast app Castro and pointed out that most of his clients wouldn't pay for the kind of little fine touches that you find in Castro, all the little animations and things that make that app, I think, particularly special. And I wanted to talk about that a little more with you today, Federico, because that's one of the things that I think that we focus on a lot at MacStories is that human touch and that extra something special that you find in certain apps. And I think it's something that's really particular to indie apps above all else, because it's a way for indie developers to set themselves apart from the big companies that are out there and attract some business. And it's very hard, I think, to put your finger on exactly what this kind of human touch is, but I think it does make a difference because it's what it does, I believe, is it creates a little bit of delight and entertainment in using apps. It makes Apple's devices themselves more approachable and friendly, which I think helps Apple, but it also helps the users, because if you can entertain people and delight them a little bit along the way to doing some sort of task, which may be just kind of something mundane like making a grocery list or something, it creates a little bit of a connection with the developer and makes the app a little bit easier to use along the way. And a lot of the time, these sorts of features, I think, show themselves in animations. I think that's a big part of this. But there are all sorts of other touches that exist as well that you see, like sound effects and other things that we're going to talk about some examples. But it's an interesting topic, I think, and I always find it hard to describe exactly what these things are, but I kind of know them when I see them. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, I mean, of course, I'm a huge fan of those personal touches in apps. And I can also see why the developers need to think carefully about adding these details to their apps, because the side effect might be that some people could see the fun touch or the personal detail as maybe unprofessional, maybe too friendly. And so I think it's one of those things that you think they're cute and they're fun, but some people may take it the wrong way. If I'm paying a subscription to a product, or if I paid $50 for an app, I don't want it to be fun. I don't want it to be cute. I just want to get work done. And so there's a balance that developers need to meet when and need to account for when adding these details. But overall, I think, judging from looking back at my history with indie apps on iOS, I think the audience usually falls in love with these details and with these tiny peculiarities that make apps unique. And even if there are potential side effects, especially if your app has a big audience, or maybe you're targeting business customers or the enterprise, and those type of users usually have no chill, and they,
Right.
they they don't like fun little animations and sound effects. But usually the typical customer of the indie app, the indie utility on the App Store, appreciates these details. And the positive side effect of this is that it creates a connection between the user and the developer. And if you're an indie developer, if you're just one person working on this app for several years, or even a team of two people, it creates that kind of relationship with the customer, that kind of feeling of mutual trust or even mutual respect. I know that it sounds silly. How could a simple sound effect or a simple animation create that connection between user and developer? And I think the secret lies in the fact that these details, these animations, they feel human, and they remind people that there's another person on the other side of the App Store working on an app, working on the utility that they use every day. And I feel like when people realize that, when it's not just like a faceless corporation that makes the app, but when there's another person, another human being, that empathy is good for business. And this is why I think it's important to focus on these details. If you know your audience, if you know what type of users you have, empathy can be a great way to keep your users closer together and make better business. Because when they have a problem, maybe they send you a personal email instead of leaving a bad review. Or
Right.
maybe those are the types of users that they promote your app for free on Twitter, when they recommend your app to their friends. And so I know that it's a sort of a butterfly effect of a tiny detail that can have a big impact. And even from us, from a journalistic perspective, these are fun details to discover and to play with.
Right. And I think you make a very good point, because these kind of touches are definitely not for every app. They're also definitely not for every customer. I think you need to kind of understand, I think developers need to understand who their customers are before they do these. And it is possible to go overboard. I've seen it before. You do have to be careful, but I do think if it's done correctly and done thoughtfully, it really does create that connection. And I know for you and I, we both really appreciate that. I think we like that. We know a lot of developers already, but it does create that kind of connection where you feel like someone on the other end cares about the software. There's a kind of craftsmanship that goes into that, I think, that it conveys, that makes it feel like someone is on the other side cares about the product that they're making. And then and an extension of that they care about the users as well.
So tell me about some of these examples that you put in this document. What are you thinking of here?
It was funny because when I put a few into the document several days ago, and then when I came back and you had dropped some in, I didn't look at yours right away, and then I started repeating some of yours, so I had to delete mine. So I think we're on the same wavelength with some of these. But the first one I guess I would talk about is Castro, because that's the one that Dermot mentioned, and I really like how the app uses animation to let the user know what's going on. And the kind of thing I'm thinking about is when you take something out of that's come to your inbox in Castro, and you want to put it in your queue, you can put it at the top of the queue or the bottom of the queue. And when you tap that button and decide where you want to put it, there's a nice little animation that shows you exactly where it's going. It kind of animates over to the queue tab, so you know exactly what's happening with the app and you know where to go find it now. It hasn't just disappeared and left you wondering what's happening.
Yeah, one of the so I'm trying Castro now on iOS 11. They're working on this excellent update. One of the things that I always do in indie apps like Castro is I go over to the about page or the credits page and I take a look at what the developers have put in there, because it's usually a great way to find out more about the developer or see, for example, the people that helped making the app. And of course, Castro has basically this page where they talk about the two developers working on the app, when work on Castro began, and they have some contributors that they thank in the credits page. It's just a way to put a name and a face behind the app that you're using. And Castro is such the way that they combine these personal touches with animations in the app, and the fact that animations are functional to the way that the app works, because it's a very visual, it's a very tactile app. You move things around, you drop episodes in a list, you rearrange them. These animations are contextual to the app, and the fact that it feels so personal, it doesn't, I think it creates this sort of, it's a nice experience. I don't know how else to describe it, but Castro feels nice to me. Nice to use, nice to look at, and I know it's made with care. And I think that the sense of care that permeates many of these apps is what sets them apart from the default podcast player made by Apple or some other big solution made by a big company. Not that Apple or other big companies don't care, but there's a sense of, it's like when you're tasting a fine wine or you're a collector and you stumble across a rare item. There's the sense of care and rarity that makes it special. And Castro is one of those apps that feels special. Even if functionally it's still a podcast player, but it's got those touches that make it feel different from any other default or more popular solution.
Right. It goes beyond just hitting play and pause and selecting your podcast. And I think it helps the user feel more in control of what they're doing when they're using the app to see exactly where everything's going and be able to move things out around in that tactile way that you described.
Yeah.
And I think those about pages and those setting pages, while a lot of users don't go to them necessarily often, I do think that is an area where some developers have done a really good job of setting themselves apart and conveying that there's a single person or maybe a few people working on an app. I mean, one that I know is on your list, and I'll let you talk about maybe now, is Overcast too, which I think Marco Arment does a nice job with this in his settings.
Yeah, absolutely. Since the first version, Marco did an excellent job in, for example, putting a privacy policy that you can actually read in plain English, or describing settings. Like, for example, the advanced options, I think he calls the nitpicky details, because
Right.
those are exactly what they are. They are nitpicky details for nitpicky people. And he made calling them that way in the settings of the app, it just makes it feel like this is the kind of app made by someone like us for people like us. And so again, the privacy policy, the way that Marco describes the settings, and I think in the old version, when it was subscription based, there was like a message that says how many people have rated Overcast this week. There wasn't like a heart emoji, and now that it's a subscription, there's X people have went premium this week, which
Right.
sort of I think it contributes to making the Overcast feel like a community, like a close community of people who prefer this third-party app to the default solution by Apple. And even the typography and the choice of colors and the very, very much opinionated design, I think reflects Marco's personality and Marco's character. You can tell that Overcast is made by Marco in the best possible way, the way that he obsesses over tiniest detail and the way that he presents every feature that deals with user information with clarity and with respect. This is the other side of the concept of the personal touch in the indie app. It's not just about the cutesy fun animation. It's about having a developer that is first and foremost also a user of this type of app, explaining things to people, whether it's a privacy policy or a setting screen. You can tell that these apps are made with care, because usually they're made by people who are making these apps because they want to use them themselves. Most of the apps that we're talking about today are made by people who've made them because they wanted those apps to exist.
Right, right. And I think things like, especially things like X number of people have rated this app this week is a really nice touch because it's respectful of the user, right? It's not putting a modal dialogue up in somebody's face and saying, rate this app. It's sitting there. And if Marco had just updated his app, that number would be really low because in the past, that's how the App Store worked. And so it would be a gentle reminder to somebody who might come across that, oh, I like this app, maybe I'll rate it and then get that number up. And I think that that's an effective way of doing it without being in people's faces. Thanks to Twist by Doist for sponsoring App Stories this week. Twist was created by Doist, the completely remote team behind Todoist, one of the favorite task managers at MacStories. Doist is 50 people working from 20 countries. A couple of years ago, they tried to use Slack to communicate, but it was completely unsustainable. Most of the team is in European time zones, so by the time the team in the US woke up, conversations were already buried. It made people feel like they had to be online all the time, which is not how Doist operates. So the Doist team rolled up their sleeves and created their own app called Twist, which was released this past June. Twist is designed around Doist's most important company values: doing meaningful work, transparency, and work-life balance. Twist is built to achieve three main goals. The first is simplicity. Twist is a single app that can handle all the different kinds of communication that happen in a company in one place without being overly complicated. The second is transparency. Twist ensures that the majority of information is accessible to and searchable by everyone. The third is the ability to time shift. Twist is asynchronous. Everyone is able to communicate on their own schedule without missing anything important. Twist doesn't have an online status indicator, and there's no unread icon either. You can snooze your notifications for up to 8 hours, schedule specific snooze times, and truly disconnect with the time off feature that will pause all your notifications while you're out of the office. Twist is perfect for teams who work remotely. Already, almost 45,000 people are using Twist to work calmly and collaborate efficiently, and then log out and enjoy their free time. Pricing is simple. Twist has a free plan and an unlimited plan for $5 per user per month. For more information, please visit twistapp.com. Thanks again to Twist by Doist for sponsoring App Stories. Another example, and I want to move to something a little different than animations and the text in an app and talk a little bit about sound effects. And the first time I ran across a really kind of delightful sound effect was, I think, in Letterpress, which it's still a game that was originally developed by Lauren Brichter, who made Tweety back in the day. And Letterpress is a simple letter game that has sound effects. And I read somewhere, and it might have even been on a really early interview on MacStories, that Lauren made all those sounds himself with mouth sounds. He just recorded himself making various popping noises, which are the sounds you get when you tap on the squares and the letters in the game. And I was reminded of that not long ago when we talked about Hidden Folks on this show, because Hidden Folks does the exact same thing, but game wide. That's the game where, you have to find various little things hidden in an animated drawing that's black and white. And when you tap on things, like you tap on a crocodile and it makes a crocodile noise. And those are all sounds that were designed and recorded by the developers themselves, which is just kind of a nice touch. And it gives a little extra, makes it a little more fun, makes it a little more delightful. And you might not ever notice it. It's more noticeable in Hidden Folks, I think, and you might not ever know that about Letterpress. But when I heard it, I thought that was really cool, and I just kind of appreciated it.
Yeah, I remember when I interviewed Lauren many years ago about Letterpress, the first version, when he told me those are actually sound effects that I made myself by spitting into the microphone.
Right.
I was like, no way you did that. And of course, those sound effects, they went through some additional processing and mixing to not sound gross or overly human. But yes, they do come from Lauren himself. I think it is smart when developers also find a way to save money by doing things themselves in a funny, weird way. For example, these sound effects, normally you would have to pay, a sound engineer or a musician to make these sounds. And this is a very do-it-yourself type of approach of recording sound effects by talking or making sounds and weird noises into a microphone and then using a computer to mix them and to process them. So it allows developers to not having to hire another person to think about this aspect, but also once you tell people, these are actually these sound effects, I made them myself. It creates it's a relatable feature that it gets people talking. People still remember that bit from my Learn interview, and it's a distinguishing trait that people remember, and that I feel like it helps them appreciate the work that went into the game in this case.
Right. And it distinguishes the game a little bit too, because another option, I suppose, would be to just go get some sort of stock sound effect off the internet, which you can find those all over the place. But then it's probably being used by dozens, hundreds of other developers in their apps. And it doesn't set you apart because everybody's sounds their bloops and beeps all end up sounding the same. Whereas, Lauren's just sounded a little different. And it's just a very, very small touch, and it maybe doesn't resonate with everybody who plays the game, but I think it definitely does. I certainly resonated with me, especially after I read Federico's interview.
Oh, one of my favorite examples of the human touch is the work that Brian Mueller is doing with the Carrot series of apps. We talked to Brian a few episodes ago, and he's the maker of Carrot Weather and artificial superintelligence, and in general, he's the mind behind the evil AI that is Carrot. And while it's fun to think of Carrot as a self aware superintelligence that is writing the dialogues itself, this is actually all Brian's work. Brian is the writer, the editor, is the creator of the all the dialogues, all the funny jokes, and all the lines of text from Carrot Weather and ASI. They come from Brian. And while I think it's easy to forget that this is just an app with a personality, but it's important to remember. Sometimes I think about, imagine this person had to sit down and write all these funny jokes and lines and dialogues between this fake superintelligence and the user. And it takes imagination, it takes time, and it takes effort when it comes to creating thousands and thousands of lines of dialogue. There's even multiple personality settings that you can change in Carrot Weather, so the app can be less or more evil when it talks to you. And so I think it's really remarkable what Brian has been able to do with making Carrot Weather legitimately sound like an evil AI living inside your phone.
Yeah, I really like that as well. It's a cool app. A whole other category of fun stuff and touches that I've seen in apps is the recent trend towards creating multiple sets of icons. It's interesting to me because it creates a slightly different connection with the customer, because the users can actually customize the app to make it look the way they want. And one of the best examples of this, of course, is pCalc, which has, I don't even know how many icons that you can set at this point. I mean, it's at least 20, I think. I haven't looked recently, but James keeps coming out with new ones, and he's got some really interesting things coming up in iOS 11, which he's been teasing quite a bit on Twitter.
James is crazy, I should say, in the best possible way. But
Right, I agree.
what James is doing with the about page of pCalc almost started as a joke or as a proof of concept, and then it evolved into something much deeper. Basically, now pCalc has sort of a mini game slash AR mode built into the app itself. Which, why would you ever want a game in a calculator app? But somehow it makes sense, and I think it makes sense because it's James, and
Right.
because he's very open about the development of the app on Twitter. People know James, and I feel like there's a sense of I'm trying to think of words to use to put into actual English of the way that I think of James. But I
He's
don't
like a
think
crazy, he's a crazy genius in a way.
he's a yeah, I see him as a crazy scientist in a lab. And I feel like if Apple put this kind of about page in their own calculator app, most people would go like, what is Apple doing? Apple has lost their minds. Like, this doesn't make any sense. But because it's James, and because you can tell that actually put a lot of care and a lot of time into learning 3D graphics and AR kit, which is new on iOS 11. I feel like because it's James and he's been working on Peacock for so many years, it makes more sense for him to do it than, say, Apple or Google to put in a game with flying bananas and cars and ARKit graphics into a calculator. I think
Yeah.
the fact that James, for many people, is Peacock. People associate James Thompson with Peacock, which has been around for 25 years. I think that makes it more acceptable, and that actually makes it fun.
It's really fun. I mean, I found myself going to try it out and then just getting sucked into the entire AR world that he's created,
Right.
throwing bananas and marbles and Peacock icons, and then lighting the whole thing on fire.
And as I was testing those features, I could totally picture James with an evil grin on his face, creating this stuff on his Mac. I don't know. I don't know why I like to have this image, but that is the benefit I think of. Indie developers have many struggles especially when it's just yourself, having to take care of the design and the code and the marketing and support. But the upside is that if people like you, well, people truly like you and help you and they support you, because this personal relationship, this human touch that is between the developer and users, I feel like corporations cannot have, and that can be helpful when you're an indie developer, when you're a solo developer. For example, now James has been able to put the custom icons of the app of Peacock behind donation in Peacock. So there's a tip jar, and if you donate to the app, you can unlock the custom icons. And I feel like because so many people want to support James, they get those custom icons in return, which, by the way, are amazing. And I truly recommend, if you're a heavy user of Peacock, as I am, to unlock the custom icons, because they let you add a personal touch to your home screen. And now James is also working with artist David Lanham on adding a new custom icon with I think it's an evil panda eating the number 2042
Oh,
on the
nice. I didn't
icon.
know that. I didn't know that.
Yeah, he posted a screenshot on Twitter a few days ago, and it's amazing. And again, this is one of those features that big companies could never do. Google and Apple could never make a custom icon with an evil panda devouring the number 42 as their icon, but James can. And that's one of the perks of being a solo developer. Nobody else can tell you what to do. And so you can do crazy things like flying bananas and pandas on icons.
All right, Federico, I think that's actually a really good place to stop.
You don't want you don't want to talk about more about evil pandas?
Yeah, I love evil pandas. I'm looking forward to that. I'm gonna have to go find that tweet because I somehow missed that this week. I guess I've been a little too busy getting ready for the iOS 11 launch.
Yeah.
We will talk to everybody again next week, and we want to thank our sponsors again, the Omni Group and Twist by Doist. If you've been enjoying the show, please consider leaving a rating on iTunes, Overcast, or just tell a friend about it. And as always, you can find both of us at MacStories.net and on Twitter, where Federico is at Vitici, that's VITICCI, and I'm at John Voorhees, JOHN VOORHEES. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.